right, y'all, we've been processing what it is, all these different fights in our lives, that what we are fighting against. And we talked about this fight for ourselves and the fight within and these burdens that God has given us. Ashley did a great job of communicating what it looks like for you to fight within your home. And now we're going to carry the conversation further. In Nehemiah chapter 2, verse 1, in the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when wine was brought for him, I took the wine and I gave it to the king. I had not been sad in his presence before. Now, what the scripture is trying to communicate is that in the month of Nisan, that means Nehemiah has been holding on to this burden for a 4-month period, right? And he said, I had not been sad in the presence before, in the presence of the king before. And the reason he's saying that is because for Nehemiah to show that something was off within him, whether he was fearful or just any sort of just his normal mannerisms being off, that might show that it's disrespectful to the king if he's not happy to be serving in the king, if he's not happy to be in this high office. And ultimately, his relationship with the king was very, very important, because just like any king that you might see in the movie, it could be off with his head at any time. And in Nehemiah, in verse 2, chapter 2, it says, so the king asked me, why does your face look so sad when you are not ill? This can be nothing but sadness of the heart. And I was very afraid, right? Nehemiah gets caught. And it shows like the king is like, hey, you're acting off and it's not physical. You're not sick. What's wrong with your heart right now? And Nehemiah, fear sets in. And the king starts to notice that something is going on with Nehemiah. Nehemiah, verse 3 of chapter 2, but I said to the king, may the king live forever. What a great response, right? Like, king, hey, you caught me, but you look good, man. You've been working out, right? Like, you got it going on right now. He's like, may the king live forever. And then he goes on and he gets real and said, hey, why should my face not look sad when the city where my ancestors are buried lies in ruin and the gates have been destroyed by fire? And in verses 4 and following, the king said to me, what is it that you want? And then Nehemiah, he prayed to God in heaven, just a real quick prayer. And he said, and I answered the king, if it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor in his sight, let him send me to the city in Judah where my ancestors are buried, so that I can rebuild it. So like he goes to the king, he tells the king his burden, and like any good leader in our lives, he's like, okay, well, what do we do about it? Well, what are you going to do about it? And real quick, Nehemiah sends up a prayer, and he knows what he has to do. This 4-month period of Nehemiah holding on to this burden, this man of prayer, has prepared him for this moment. And he's got the king's ear. The king he's built up influence in the king's life to where it shows that if you're faithful with little, right, he's the cupbearer. He's making sure that the king has wine when he wants it. And Nehemiah up to this point has built up his faithfulness in the eyes of the king, that now he has the king's ear. And Nehemiah knows this, so he goes and he tells them, hey, this city is destroyed in which my ancestors are from. Send me, I need to go fix it. And in verses 6 and following of chapter 2, it says, then the king, with the queen sitting right beside him, asked me, how long will your journey take? And when will you get back? It pleased the king to send me, so I set a time. Nehemiah was so prepared for this moment, right? 4 months of prepping, praying, planning, all those P words, right? All those P words, and it gets to verse 7. I also said to him, if it pleases the king, may I have letters to the governors of the Trans-Euphrates, so that they will provide me a safe conduct until I arrive in Judah. And also one more thing, may I have a letter to Asaph, the keeper of the royal park, and he will give me all the timber I need, right? The wood that I need to be able to rebuild all that's happening in Jerusalem. And also, hey, can you make sure that the gates and the citadel by the temple and the city wall and the residents that all occupy it, because I need a gracious hand of my God was on me, because the king granted all of Nehemiah's requests, right? He was prepared. He had this king's ear, and he said, hey, and he knew all these people's names. He's like, hey, I need a letter from this guy. I'm going to need some wood, so please give me a referral to this man. Nehemiah had been planning, praying, fasting, and he's not just chilling watching Netflix in his free time. He's not just always on social media. He is studying everything that he would need to do in order to move upon this burden that God has given him. Right? He's slowly building up the knowledge of what it looks like for the need in his day. And that's what leads you to be a successful leader. You need to pray and you need to plan. And he got permission, and the king gives him all the letters that he needs. And in verses 12 and 13 of chapter 2, he sees the damage. He gets to Jerusalem. He sees the damage, and he processes it for what it is. And in verse 17, he has this really humble moment with his people. And he says, hey, let's be honest. These walls are in really bad shape. Let's be honest about the problem here, and let's arise and a community around me, let's build. And in verse 18, he mobilizes the other people around him to be a part of this rebuild. And what's beautiful about this is I think it shows us perfectly what it looks like for us to move and to work and to fight with our local church, to lean into a community of believers and to move together to rebuild the need that's in our community. Right? People start in all different places, and they go in all different places, in all different directions. But I think for most of teenagers, you are probably still in Nehemiah chapter 1, and that's exactly where you're supposed to be, processing the burdens that God has placed you. But now we know that you have time to prepare, to plan, and to prepare what God might do in you to rise up other leaders alongside you to rebuild where you see need in your land. But there's strength in numbers. You cannot do this alone. And hopefully you are watching this with a group of people. And y'all can rally together as y'all process just Nehemiah chapter 2 and the heart of Nehemiah and all the planning and praying and preparing that he did to get to this moment in Jerusalem. And he had the buy-in of his community to link arms and to go and to rebuild. So what does that look like for you? Wherever you're at, in your school, in your home, in your cities, what does it look like for you to plug into your local church? To plug into a body of believers to be able to link arms and to rebuild what may be broken in your community.